Hello and welcome to Module 5. Module 5 is a section that's titled Competition and Fair Play. It's kind of hard to really put a clear definition on what we're looking at exactly in this module. I'll talk a little bit more about the readings. I guess the way that I would kind of summarize it is kind of by another number of questions that we're trying to answer in this module. One question would be, what is cheating and how does it affect our concept of a game or what a game is? Another question is, when you violate rules, how does it affect the outcome of a game? And what are the factors related to that? This module covers what role skill plays in determining the outcome of a game, and kind of addresses the whole idea of what the point of a game is. Is it to determine who the most skilled person is, and how do we feel if it's clear that a less skilled individual or team comes out the winner? Also related to that, what determines the winner of a game? Is it based on skill, like I just mentioned, or are there other things that come into that, like how cunning the opponent is, how good they are at exploiting the rules, or their effort or lack thereof, or something else? Kind of like what is kind of at the heart of the nature of the game. And then definitely there's an element in this module where we kind of look at, is cheating always wrong morally and ethically, or is there instances when cheating can to some extent be a part of the game and a part of sports? And you'll find in these readings that there's different opinions on that and different slants that the authors take. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of the topics from the 5 chapters here that we have for reading. I think you're going to enjoy these chapters. They're pretty thought-provoking, and so hopefully you'll find them to be as useful to read as I did. I really appreciated some of the arguments, and they really made me think about different things, and I think they will generate some pretty good discussion. So the first article by Dixon, he kind of looked at the fact that the most skilled or best team does not always win games, and there's a number of factors that he looks at that affect that, things like refereeing, bad luck, cheating, gamesmanship. Those can affect the outcome of a game and help teams that are inferior in skill to win. And one of the interesting things that I felt that came out from that is he uses that whole idea to argue that the system we use for playoffs in American sports, I think the NFL he was probably thinking of in particular, he doesn't think is a very good system, because it's not a very good indicator of athletic superiority, because on a given game, something like a bad call or just bad luck or gamesmanship or cheating, or just even a team having a lack of effort on that given game can result in a athletically superior team losing. And that's interesting to me just because I'm kind of a college football fan, and that's been a really big debate in college football for pretty much my whole lifetime, whether there should be a playoff system similar to what the NFL uses, or whether they should go on regular season wins. Dixon would argue that regular season wins is a better indication of the more skilled team. So yeah, there's that one, and there's some arguments he makes in that article that get referred to later on in some of the other articles as part of the discussion about cheating. So there's some interesting things there also. The second article by Lehman, he argues that an idea of fair play that doesn't include cheating is kind of limited. He argues that there's a difference between sports and life, and things in life where people cheat, like cheating in business or on their taxes or whatever, that we pretty much across the board think are bad, are different in sports because sports aren't as serious. And he argues even that having the wits to figure out how to cheat effectively adds interest to sports. And so that's kind of his argument. The third article by Torres, he argues that the goal of a game is to decipher who the most skilled team is. And so he kind of divides, let me go back. He argues that the goal is to decipher the most skilled team within the set rules. So he divides those skills into two categories, constitutive and restorative. And these words come up in the next couple articles too. So it's kind of important to understand what he's talking about there. And the basic idea is that constitutive skills are the main skills that make up the game, like in basketball, dribbling, passing, and shooting, whereas restorative rules are the rules that, or skills are the skills that are needed when making up for violated rules. So in basketball, that would be free throw shooting. In soccer, it would be like penalty kicks or a throw in. Same thing in basketball, pass in from the sidelines. So he kind of makes a distinction between those two, and his argument really is that the game should be determined by constitutive rules, and he's not really a big fan of the restorative rules having a big role in the game. And then he kind of ends his article talking about and giving examples of why that's so bad, with examples from soccer and the penalty kick, and how people don't really like soccer games being resolved by penalty kicks. So it's an interesting argument, but it also comes into play in the next two articles because they kind of refer to this whole idea and to his argument. And his argument is also related to the whole discussion about whether strategic fouling is cheating or not, and whether we should accept it. The next article is by Frawley, and he kind of starts out by making a distinction between the two views of cheating. One being the formal view where cheating is always wrong no matter what the circumstance, and people like that would argue, people who hold that view would argue that strategic fouling is wrong and shouldn't be a part of sports. And then the other view is that cheating can be accepted, or an accepted part of the game, really based on the social context. So if both teams kind of go into the contest with the agreement that strategic fouling is acceptable, then it should be. He kind of goes on to make the argument that there's some latitude for accepting intentional or tactical rule violations, but he believes it should be very narrow. And at the end of the day, he really is kind of making the argument for the formal view, which is that there shouldn't really be any circumstance in which intentional fouling is acceptable. And then the last article by Simon really is a refutation of Frawley's. Personally, I think he made some pretty good arguments. You guys can read it and kind of see what you think. But his argument kind of goes back to Torrey's breakdown of the constitutive and the restorative. And his argument is that really the restorative skills are still very important to the game. And if you think about it in basketball, being a good free throw shooter in basketball is really pretty significant. And so he really argues that, strategic fouling gets rewarded with free throw shooting. So it still requires a lot of skill and can be a significant part of the game. And in fact, it makes the game more competitive and more interesting than, say, just doing nothing and letting the opposing team run out the clock. And I think it's a pretty strong argument. But yeah, like I said, you can read it and, see what you think of that. Okay, so that's basically the rundown of this section. And yeah, on the discussion board, again, what I'm really looking for here is to, have you kind of take things from the readings and talk about how they fit with your own views and a Christian perspective, and how we can maybe, further develop our views of, what's ethical and what's not, as far as it comes to competition and fair play, what's fair. I think that, there's definitely some ways we can apply Christian principles to these arguments. And they're pretty complex. So, that's interesting too. We might not all come to the same conclusions here. And I don't think that's necessarily going to mean that we're relativists or anything like that. But sometimes it's a different view of what exactly we're trying to accomplish with sports. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you might have to say about that.